I arrived at my mother's house on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, and the first thing I saw was a real estate agent's sedan in the driveway and a for sale sign staked into the front lawn. 9 years after my family threw me out for refusing to lie, they needed my signature to sell the house they had erased me from. My mother had already signed the preliminary papers. Andrea was waiting for the last signature. Mine. The sign was new, the metal post still gleaming, the word, "Coming soon," printed in large navy letters. I sat in my car for a moment with the engine off and my hands resting on the wheel. I had not seen this house in 9 years. Someone had already begun erasing it. The photographs were the first thing I noticed when I walked inside. They had been taken down from the hallway walls, every single one, and stacked in a cardboard box near the front door. The frames were separated by sheets of newspaper, and the box was labeled in Andrea's handwriting, "Photos. Sort later." I could see the top photograph through the gap in the newspaper. It was my parents, on their wedding day. My father's handwriting was still visible on the back, his neat block letters identifying the date and the church. He had labeled every photograph in this house. Now they were stacked like inventory. I had not planned to be here. I had not planned to see my mother again. 2 days earlier, I was at my desk in Albany, reviewing a long-term care claim for a woman whose family had placed her in a facility that billed for services it never provided. The facility had submitted charges for physical therapy sessions that never happened, medication management that did not occur, and a private room that was actually a shared space with a curtain divider. I had flagged the claim for investigation and was drafting my report when my phone buzzed. The front desk. A woman was in the lobby, they said. She had been there for 2 hours. She said she was my mother, but she could not remember my apartment number. I took the elevator down. My mother was sitting on the bench near the mailboxes, wearing a light wool coat despite the warm weather, holding a manila envelope in both hands. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was gray now, cut short in a style I did not recognize. She looked up when I approached, and for a moment, there was no recognition on her face. Then she smiled, and the smile was my mother's smile, the one I remembered from before everything happened. "Claire," she said, "I found you." She had taken a bus, 4 hours from Utica, with a transfer in Syracuse. She had purchased the ticket at the station that morning, she explained, but the details were hazy. Andrea had told her something about the house, something about signing. Andrea had said it was important, that Claire needed to sign something, that everything depended on it. My mother could not explain what the documents were or why they mattered. She only knew that Andrea had been insistent and that she had wanted to see me. "I don't remember your number," she said. "I had it written down somewhere, but I couldn't find the paper. So I thought if I just came here, someone would help me find you." I brought her upstairs. I made tea. She sat at my kitchen table and looked around my apartment with the careful attention of someone trying to memorize a room. "It's nice," she said. "Very clean. You were always organized." She said this as if 9 years had not passed, as if our last conversation had been a week ago, instead of my father telling me to pack my things and leave. I opened the envelope. Inside were preliminary sale documents for the family home. Several pages. My mother had already signed her name on 3 of them. Her signature was shaky, but recognizable. The lines for my signature were blank. The documents described the property, listed an asking price, and identified a buyer. The total amount was lower than I expected. The buyer's name meant nothing to me. Andrea's name appeared on several pages as the designated contact and financial manager. Under the proposed arrangement, the sale proceeds would be placed in an account she managed for my mother's care. I would receive no statements and have no access to the account. Andrea would control the money alone. I asked my mother what Andrea had told her. She said Andrea had explained that the house was too much for her to manage alone, that she needed to move somewhere safer, that selling the house would pay for her care. Andrea had found a facility. Andrea had arranged everything. Andrea had said Claire's signature was the last piece. "Are you sure you want to sell?" I asked. My mother looked at her tea. "Andrea says it's the right thing. She's been handling everything since your father died." "I don't know. I get tired so easily now. The doctor says it's from the stroke. Some days I feel fine. Other days, I can't remember what I did that morning." Andrea says I shouldn't worry about the details. She says she's taking care of everything. I told her I would drive her home the next day. I told her I needed to understand the documents before I signed anything. She seemed relieved. "Andrea will be happy," she said. "She said you might be difficult." I told her you wouldn't be. I called my supervisor that evening and requested personal leave. I did not explain why. The drive took most of the next morning. My mother dozed in the passenger seat. When we pulled onto the street where I grew up, she opened her eyes and said, "The sign is new." She did not sound upset. She sounded like someone noting a change in the weather. The real estate agent's car was in the driveway. I parked behind it and helped my mother out of the passenger seat. She moved slowly. Her balance was not what it had been. She held my arm as we walked to the front door. The house was my father's house. He had bought it in 1982, the year before I was born, and he had maintained it with the kind of meticulous attention that made neighbors stop to compliment the lawn. The front porch still had the swing he had hung when Andrea and I were children. The paint was peeling now. The gutters needed cleaning. Small things, but my father would have noticed them. He had been dead for 3 years. Inside, the house was in a state of organized disassembly. The living room furniture was still in place, but each piece had a colored sticker affixed to it. I recognized the system from estate sales I had seen. Different colors meant different destinations. The bookshelves were half empty, the remaining books stacked in uneven piles. The curtains had been taken down. The walls were bare. The family photographs were gone from the hallway. I stopped in front of the empty wall where they used to hang. For 30 years, that wall had been a timeline of our lives. Claire's first day of kindergarten, Andrea's dance recital, the trip to the Adirondacks when I was 12, my father's parents, framed in sepia, my mother's graduation photo from the year she finished her teaching degree. Now there was nothing but rectangles of darker paint where the frames had blocked the sun. I could hear voices in the kitchen, Andrea's voice, and a man's voice I did not recognize. I walked toward the sound. My mother stayed in the living room, lowering herself onto the sofa with a sigh. Andrea was standing at the kitchen counter with a man in a navy blazer. They were reviewing a listing sheet. Andrea was pointing at something, nodding. She looked up when I entered. For a moment, her expression was unguarded. Then the performance arrived. "Claire," she said, "you came. That's wonderful. We can finally get everything settled." She looked the same in some ways. Her hair was shorter, her face a little sharper. She was dressed well, in dark jeans and a blouse that looked expensive. She had always been good at presenting herself. When we were younger, I had mistaken that for confidence. Now, I recognized it as armor. "This is Mark," she said, gesturing toward the man in the blazer. "He's handling the listing for us. Mark, this is my sister, Claire." Mark smiled, extended his hand. "Great to meet you. Andrea's been keeping me updated. We're on a pretty tight timeline, but I think everything's in order, just waiting on a few signatures." I did not shake his hand. I need to understand what I'm signing before anyone gets my signature. Andrea's smile tightened. "Of course, absolutely. We want you to be comfortable. Mark, do you mind giving us a few minutes?" Mark excused himself. Andrea waited until he was gone, then turned to me. "I know this is a lot. I know you haven't been here. But Mom needs this. She can't live here alone anymore. The stroke changed things. She forgets to eat. She leaves the stove on. I've been coming over every day, But I have my own family, my own responsibilities. I can't be here 24 hours a day. This is the right thing for everyone. I'm not saying it isn't, I said. I'm saying I need to understand the details. She studied me for a moment. Whatever she saw seemed to satisfy her. Of course. Take whatever time you need. Just don't take too long. The buyer is motivated, and the facility has a waiting list. We're on a clock here. She said this as if the clock was a neutral fact, not something she had created. I did not respond. I walked past her into the rest of the house. The kitchen was clean but empty. I opened the refrigerator. Half a carton of milk, the expiration date 3 days past. A few takeout containers from a neighbor. No fresh vegetables. No eggs, no bread, no butter. Andrea had said she came over every day. She had not been shopping. She had not been cooking. She had been managing logistics. I found my mother in the living room. She was sitting on the sofa, looking at the empty wall. I don't remember which photographs were there, she said. I know there were photographs. I don't remember which ones. I sat down next to her. There was one of me at my college graduation, I said. You were standing next to me in a blue dress. Dad took the picture. He had his thumb partly over the lens, so the corner was dark. She nodded slowly. I remember the dress. I don't remember the photograph. I did not know what to say to that. I sat with her until she closed her eyes. Then I got up and began searching for the documents that would explain exactly what my sister was trying to do. The trust documents were in a folder in my father's old study. The room had been cleared out. His desk was empty. His books were boxed. The smell of his pipe tobacco, which had lingered in the curtains for years, was gone. The room did not feel like his anymore. It felt like a room waiting to belong to someone else. I sat at his desk and read. The trust was straightforward. My father had created it 9 years ago, shortly after he had told me to leave. I did not know that at the time. I had been gone for months, living in a rented room in Albany, still waiting for a phone call, still believing someone would ask me to come home. While I was waiting, my father was sitting in a lawyer's office, placing the family home into a trust that required both of his daughter's signatures to sell. He had exiled me from the family, and then built a legal mechanism that guaranteed I would have to be consulted before the house could ever change hands. I could not reconcile those two facts. I am not sure he could either. The terms were clear. My mother was the lifetime beneficiary, with the right to live in the house until her death. After her death, the house would be sold and the proceeds divided equally between Andrea and me. Early sale was permitted, but only under 3 conditions. First, my mother could no longer safely live in the home. Second, my mother gave her informed, written consent. Third, both Andrea and I provided our written approval. All 3 conditions had to be met. My mother's signature alone was not enough. Andrea's signature alone was not enough. Without my approval, the sale could not close. I sat at my father's empty desk and tried to understand what he had done. He had not called me. He had not apologized. He had not told the family the truth about Andrea's lie. But he had made sure that no one could sell this house without my consent. It was not forgiveness. It was not even an explanation. It was a locked door that only I could open, and he had given me the key without ever telling me it existed. I thought about Andrea's timeline, her motivated buyer, her facility waiting list. She needed me. She had not wanted me, had not contacted me in 9 years, but she needed my signature, and she was confident she would get it. I needed to understand why. I spent the next several hours going through the sale documents. The buyer was a limited liability company, registered to an address I did not recognize. The listing price was roughly 15% below the market value I could estimate from comparable sales in the area. The real estate agent, Mark, was a local broker who had handled several properties in the neighborhood. His commission was standard, Nothing illegal, nothing obviously wrong. But the price bothered me. In a normal market, a house on this street with this much land should have sold for more. I called my colleague Tanya. We had worked together for 7 years. She was the only person in my life who knew anything about my family, and even she knew only the barest outline. I had learned to keep that door closed. "I need a favor," I said. "There's a long-term care facility near Utica. I need the state inspection record and the contract terms." Tanya did not ask why. She said she would pull the file and call me back. While I waited, I walked through the house. My childhood bedroom was unrecognizable. Andrea had converted it into storage. Boxes of Christmas decorations, old baby equipment, a broken floor lamp. The walls were still the pale yellow my mother had painted when I was 14. The closet was empty except for a single wire hanger. There was no trace of me anywhere in this room, except for a small hook in the bathroom where my robe used to hang. And even that was just a hook, a piece of hardware, not a memory. I found my mother in the kitchen. She was standing at the counter, looking at the wall calendar. The calendar was blank. The last written entry was from 3 months ago. A dentist appointment in Andrea's handwriting. "Do you have plans this week?" I asked. She turned. "I'm not sure. Andrea usually tells me. She writes things down, but I think she took the old calendar. This one is new." I looked at the blank calendar. My mother had been an English teacher for 35 years. She had managed classrooms full of teenagers, lesson plans, parent conferences, curriculum reviews. She had been the kind of organized that made other people feel disorganized by comparison. Now she was standing in her kitchen, unable to remember her plans for the week, waiting for Andrea to tell her what came next. "When did the stroke happen?" I asked. "Last year. No, a year and a half. The doctor said I was lucky. I can still walk, I can still talk. Some people can't." She paused. "I get tired. My memory isn't what it was. Andrea says I repeat myself. I don't always notice. Do you feel safe living here alone?" She was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. The stairs make me nervous. I fell once, last winter. Andrea found me. She was very upset. She said I couldn't stay here anymore. She said it was too dangerous." "What did the doctor say?" "The doctor said I shouldn't be alone for long periods. He said I needed someone to check on me. Andrea said she would do it. And she did, for a while. But she has the children, and Robert travels for work, and it's a lot." She looked at me. "I don't want to be a burden to anyone. I know you've been gone. I know that was my fault. I don't want to make things harder now." I did not know how to respond to that. I wanted to tell her that being gone was not my choice. I wanted to tell her that I had spent 9 years waiting for a phone call that never came. But she looked so tired, so fragile, that I could not bring myself to say any of it. Instead, I said, "I'm going to figure out what's happening. You don't have to do anything right now." She nodded. She did not ask what I meant. She turned back to the blank calendar. Tanya called back that evening. She had the inspection report and the contract. The facility Andrea had selected had been cited 3 times in the past 2 years. The first citation was for inadequate staffing. The second was for medication errors. The third was for a resident who had exited the building unsupervised and was not found for 6 hours. The facility had been fined. It had been placed on a provisional license. It was still operating, but the state was monitoring it closely. And the contract terms were worse than I expected. The base rate was affordable for exactly 6 months. After that, there was a 300% increase. It went from manageable to impossible. Nobody stayed there long-term unless they had serious money. Most residents transferred out after the 6-month mark. A lot of them ended up in Medicaid beds somewhere else. Claire, this place is bad, Tanya said. What's going on? My mother, I said. My sister is trying to move her there. There was a pause. In 7 years, I had never mentioned my mother. I had never mentioned my sister. Tanya knew I was from upstate New York. She knew I had no family photos on my desk, no holiday plans, no emergency contacts beyond a neighbor's phone number. She had never asked. Do you need help? She said. I think I have what I need. Call me if that changes. I hung up. I sat at my father's empty desk. The inspection report was in my email, the contract terms were on my phone, the sale documents were spread across the desk. I had enough to understand what Andrea was doing. What I did not have was an explanation for why. That explanation came the next night. I had been searching the basement for any additional financial records. The basement was cold and cluttered. My father's workbench was still there, his tools still hanging on the pegboard in the order he had always kept them. Boxes of old tax returns were stacked against the wall. Behind the water heater, half hidden by a pile of drop cloths, I found a filing cabinet. It was locked. The lock was old and small. I used a screwdriver from the workbench to pry it open. Inside were folders, tax returns going back 20 years, receipts, bank statements. My father had kept everything, cataloged and dated, the same meticulous attention he had brought to the lawn and the house and the family photographs. And tucked in the back, behind the financial records, was a sealed manila envelope with my name written on it in his handwriting. I opened it. Inside was a photograph. Me, at 23, sitting beside a hospital bed. Aunt Margaret was in the bed. She was thin, her hair gone from the chemotherapy, but she was smiling. I was reading to her. I could see the book in my hands. I could see the date on the whiteboard behind her, partially cropped, but still legible. It was 3 weeks before she died. Behind the photograph were receipts, pharmacy receipts, with dates circled. Each date matched a visit I had made. Each receipt was for medication Margaret needed, medication I had picked up, medication I had paid for. My father had collected them. He had circled the dates. He had kept them in this envelope. At the bottom of the stack was a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was his. The pen had pressed hard enough to leave grooves in the paper. The message was one line. I knew. I said nothing. That is my debt, not yours. I sat on the cold basement floor. The photograph, the receipts, the single line. He had known. He had collected evidence that proved I was telling the truth. And he had said nothing. He had let Andrea claim my work. He had let the family believe her version. He had told me to leave. He had died without ever speaking to me again. This was not an apology. An apology would have been sent. An apology would have been delivered while he was alive. This was a confession he had written for himself, a truth he could not speak but could not destroy. He had left it in a locked cabinet in a basement. He had left it for me to find, or not find, after he was gone. I had spent 9 years wondering if my family had genuinely believed Andrea's lie. I had told myself that Andrea was convincing, that she had always been better at telling stories, that my parents had been deceived. I had told myself this because the alternative was unbearable. The alternative was that they knew the truth and chose Andrea anyway. And that was exactly what had happened. I remembered that year with painful clarity. Aunt Margaret was my father's sister. When she was diagnosed, there was no question about who would help. Andrea had young children. She lived near our parents. She was busy. I was 28, unmarried, working remotely. I was the logical choice. I took leaves from work. I slept in hospital chairs. I managed Margaret's medications, her insurance, her appointments. I paid for a home health aide when I could not be there. I did all of this because Margaret had no one else, and because I loved her, and because it was the right thing to do. Andrea visited twice, once at the hospital for 40 minutes, once at the funeral, where she stood beside our parents and accepted condolences as if she had been the one in the room for all those months. Margaret's will was modest. She had a small savings account, some jewelry, and a bequest of $15,000 to the person who provided care in her final months. Margaret had told me about this. She had wanted me to have something, she said, to help with the expenses I had taken on. She had not put my name in the will because she assumed no one would contest who that person was. Andrea contested. She told the extended family that she had been Margaret's primary caregiver. She described visits that never happened. She described care she never provided. She produced a calendar with dates marked in her handwriting, dates she claimed were the days she had been with Margaret. The calendar was a fabrication, but Andrea was convincing. And I was so tired from months of caregiving, so drained from grief, that I could barely summon the energy to defend myself. Our parents believed Andrea, or seemed to believe her. They asked me to sign a family statement confirming Andrea's version. They said it would be easier for everyone. They said the money was not important. They said the family needed to stay united. They said I should be the bigger person. I refused. I told them I would not lie. I told them Andrea was lying. I told them to look at the receipts, the pharmacy records, the dates on Margaret's whiteboard. My father said I was being stubborn. My mother said I was causing unnecessary conflict. Andrea said I was jealous that she had a family and I did not. My father told me to pack my things and leave. He said I was no longer welcome in his house. He said if I could not support the family, I did not deserve to be part of it. I left. I drove away with 2 suitcases and nowhere to go. Andrea got the $15,000. Andrea got the family. I got 9 years of silence. And now, I was sitting in my father's basement, holding proof that he had known the truth the entire time. He had collected receipts that contradicted Andrea's story. He had circled dates that proved my presence. He had written a confession that he never sent. And 9 years ago, around the time I was starting over in Albany, he had built a trust that required my signature before the family home could be sold. I put the photograph, the receipts, and the letter back in the envelope. I closed the filing cabinet. I walked upstairs. It was past midnight. The house was silent. My mother was asleep. Andrea had gone home hours ago. I sat at the kitchen table. I looked at the blank calendar on the wall. I thought about what I needed to do. The next morning, I called an elder law attorney. I explained the trust. I explained the sale. I explained my mother's condition. The attorney confirmed what the trust documents said. My mother's preliminary signature could be revoked if she had not been given full information. Without my written consent, the sale could not proceed. I had leverage. But leverage of this kind is a strange thing. It meant I could stop Andrea from selling the house. It did not mean I could make my mother trust me. It did not mean I could undo the narrative Andrea had spent 18 months building. The law could block a transaction. It could not repair a family. I began preparing. I did not confront Andrea immediately. I wanted to understand everything first. I drove to the facility myself. It was a single-story building 30 minutes from town, a converted motel from the 1960s. The parking lot was cracked. The landscaping was minimal. The sign out front was faded. Inside, the lobby smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet. The memory care unit was a hallway with a television at one end and an exit door that did not lock. I counted the staff on duty. 3 people for 30 residents. The staffing ratio was worse than the inspection report had indicated. The administrator was a woman in her 50s named Brenda. She was surprised I had questions. "Most families don't ask," she said. "They're usually just looking for an open bed." I asked about the 6-month rate. She confirmed it. I asked about the increase after 6 months. She confirmed that too. She said the facility was designed for short-term transitional care, not permanent placement. The idea is that residents stabilize here and then move somewhere more appropriate, she said. That's what the 6-month window is for. Andrea had not mentioned the 6-month window to my mother. Andrea had told my mother the facility would take care of her permanently. Andrea had lied. I asked Brenda if Andrea had discussed long-term plans. Brenda checked her notes. Your sister said your mother's pension would cover the costs after the initial period. She seemed confident about it. My mother's pension was $1,600 a month. The facility's post-6-month rate was more than 4 times that. Andrea was either lying to Brenda or lying to herself. Either way, my mother would run out of money within months. I drove back to the house. Andrea's car was in the driveway. She was in the kitchen, on her phone, when I walked in. She ended the call quickly when she saw me. I've been trying to reach you, she said. The buyer wants to close by the end of the month. I need to know when you're going to sign. I visited the facility, I said. Her expression did not change. And? And the rate triples after 6 months. Mom's pension won't cover it. She'll be broke in less than a year. Andrea sighed. She sat down at the kitchen table. She looked tired. I know about the rate. I was going to figure something out. There are programs, assistance. You can apply for things once she's a resident. It's easier when they're already in the system. You told Mom it was permanent. You told her everything was paid for. I told her what she needed to hear. She's terrified, Claire. She's scared of losing the house, scared of being a burden, scared of dying alone. If I gave her every detail, she'd spiral. She'd refuse to go. Then what? She falls down the stairs? She leaves the stove on and burns the place down? I'm trying to protect her. This isn't protection. This is liquidation. Andrea's face hardened. You don't get to judge me. You've been gone for 9 years. You have no idea what it's been like. The stroke, the recovery, the appointments, the medications, the days when she couldn't remember my name. I did all of that. Me, not you. You were in Albany, living your life, pretending we didn't exist. And now you show up and start asking questions like you care? You don't care. You just don't want me to get anything. I looked at her. For the first time, I thought I understood. You think you earned it, I said. The house, the money, the right to decide. You think because you stayed, all of it belongs to you. It does belong to me, she said. I was here. I did the work. I managed the appointments and the medications and the crisis calls in the middle of the night. You left. You don't get to come back now and claim half of something you abandoned. I didn't leave. I was thrown out. There's a difference. There's no difference. The result is the same. You weren't here. I was. She did not say it with malice. She said it with the conviction of someone who had told herself the same story so many times, it had become indistinguishable from fact. Andrea was not a thief in her own mind. She was a woman collecting what she was owed. 9 years of proximity. 9 years of managing. 9 years of being the daughter who stayed. The house was not just an asset. It was the proof that her sacrifice had been real. And my signature was not just a legal requirement. It was an acknowledgement that she had earned more than me. I did not argue with her. I had learned years ago that arguing with Andrea was pointless. She did not argue to find the truth. She argued to win. I need more time, I said. She stood up. The buyer won't wait forever. Neither will the facility. You have until the end of the week. She left. I listened to her car pull out of the driveway. The house was quiet again. My mother was in the living room, watching a game show with the volume turned low. She had not heard any of it. That night, my mother called me. She was upstairs in her bedroom. Her voice was strained. Andrea told me what you're doing, she said. She said you're trying to stop the sale. She said you want to take the house for yourself. That's not true. I'm trying to make sure you have all the information before you make a decision. I don't want more information. I don't want to fight. I just want this to be over. Her voice cracked. Please, Claire. I can't do this again. I can't have you two fighting. It's going to be like last time. I can't. This isn't like last time. It feels like last time. Andrea is upset. She said you're trying to put me in a state facility. She said you're going to take your half of the house and leave. Andrea is lying to you. I don't know what to believe. You both tell me different things. I'm so tired. I can't think straight anymore. She was crying now. Maybe you should just sign. Maybe it would be easier. Mom, I have to go. I'm sorry. I have to go. She hung up. I stood in my father's study, holding my phone, listening to the silence. Andrea had gotten to her. Of course she had. Andrea had been managing my mother for 18 months, controlling what information she received, shaping what she believed. I had been back for 3 days. I had no standing. I had no relationship. I had no leverage, except the signature I was refusing to give. I did not consider signing. I knew too much now. The facility was unsafe. The contract was predatory. The sale price was too low. Signing would make me complicit in something that would harm my mother. But stopping the sale was not the same as winning. I could block Andrea legally. I could not make my mother trust me. I could not undo the story Andrea had told. I could not force my mother to see me as anything other than the daughter who had disappeared for 9 years and returned to cause trouble. That was the real defeat. Not that I might lose the house, that I might stop the sale and still lose my mother. Not to Andrea's lies, but to the exhaustion of being caught between 2 daughters who each claimed to be protecting her. She might choose Andrea anyway. Not because Andrea was right, because Andrea was familiar, because Andrea had been there, because the conflict itself was more than my mother could bear. I sat in the dark study, the envelope with my father's confession on the desk in front of me. He had given me legal power without ever giving me an explanation. I could not change what he had done. I could only decide what I would do. I called my Aunt Helen. She was my mother's older sister. She had been close to Aunt Margaret. She had been at the funeral 9 years ago. One of the relatives who listened to Andrea's story and said nothing. Helen answered on the second ring. Claire, it's been a long time. I need to ask you something about Aunt Margaret. There was a pause. Go ahead. Did you know Andrea was lying? The pause was longer this time. When Helen spoke, her voice was quiet. I suspected. Margaret told me, before she died, that you were the one taking care of her. She said you were there almost every day. She said Andrea had visited once. I knew Andrea's story didn't match what Margaret had told me. But I didn't say anything. Your mother was so upset. Your father was so angry. It seemed easier to let it go. She stopped. I've thought about that for 9 years. I should have spoken up. I'm sorry. I'm not asking for an apology, I said. I'm asking for your help. Andrea is trying to sell the house. She's hiding things from Mom. There's going to be a family meeting. I need someone there who will listen. What kind of meeting? Andrea's calling it a family update. She's going to have everyone there. The realtor, the facility people. I wasn't even invited. I found out from a text Andrea sent to the realtor that she forwarded to me by mistake. She wants to pressure me into signing in front of everyone. When is it? Saturday, 3 o'clock, at the house. Helen was quiet. I could hear her thinking. I'll be there, she said. I won't promise anything else, but I'll listen. That was enough. The next day, Andrea made her move. I drove to the house in the morning, intending to speak with my mother alone. Andrea answered the door. She did not step aside. Mom is resting, she said. She had a difficult night. She doesn't want to see anyone right now. I'm not anyone. I'm her daughter. She specifically said she didn't want to see you. You upset her last night. She told me she needs space. You're lying. I'm protecting my mother. You should try it sometime. She started to close the door. I'll let you know when she's ready to talk. The door closed. I stood on the porch. I had no legal right to enter. Andrea was my mother's primary caregiver, her designated contact, the person who managed her schedule and her medications and her access to the outside world. I could not force my way in without causing a scene that would only distress my mother further. I walked back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time. This was what Andrea did. She controlled access. She controlled information. She had done it 9 years ago with the family narrative, and she was doing it now with my mother. She had positioned herself as the gatekeeper. If I wanted to reach my mother, I had to go through her. And she had just shown me that the gate was closed. I drove to a motel on the edge of town. I checked into a room with a view of the parking lot and a heater that rattled when it turned on. I sat on the bed and looked at the envelope from my father's filing cabinet. The photograph of me at 23 reading to Aunt Margaret. The circled receipts. The single line in his handwriting. I knew. I said nothing. That is my debt, not yours. Saturday arrived gray and cold. I drove to the house at 2:30. There were already cars in the driveway. Andrea's SUV, a sedan I recognized as Aunt Helen's. A pickup that belonged to Uncle Ray. The realtor's car. A vehicle with a facility logo on the side. I walked in without knocking. The meeting was in the living room. Andrea had arranged the chairs in a semicircle. She was standing near the fireplace, holding a folder mid-sentence. The realtor, Mark, was seated near the window. The facility's admissions coordinator, a woman in a gray suit, was on the sofa. Aunt Helen and Uncle Ray were in armchairs. Robert, Andrea's husband, was standing near the doorway, arms crossed. My mother was in her usual chair, the one by the lamp, looking small and tired. Andrea stopped when she saw me. Claire, I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure I was invited. Aunt Helen caught my eye. She did not smile. She did not nod. But she did not look away. Andrea recovered quickly. I was just updating everyone on the timeline. The buyer is ready to close. The facility has a bed available next week. We're in the final stages. We just need Claire's signature on a few remaining documents, and then everything is finalized. She turned to me. I'm hoping we can take care of that today. Mom needs this to be over. The stress is affecting her health. The room was watching me. This was Andrea's arena. She had the audience. She had the narrative. She had my mother, who would not meet my eyes. I did not argue with her. I did not make a speech. I sat down in the one empty chair, and I waited. Andrea continued her presentation. She walked everyone through the timeline, the closing date, the move-in date at the facility, the dispersal of the proceeds. She spoke smoothly, competently, the capable daughter managing a difficult situation. She made it sound like a foregone conclusion, like the only thing standing between my mother and safety was my stubbornness. When she finished, she looked at me. Claire, do you have anything you'd like to add before we finalize everything? I stood up. I did not walk to the center of the room. I stayed where I was. There are a few things I think everyone should know, I said. The facility Andrea selected covers 6 months of care at the rate she quoted. After 6 months, the monthly cost triples. Mom's pension won't cover it. She would run out of money within a year. Andrea started to interrupt. I kept going. The house is listed about 15% below market value. Mark can confirm that if anyone wants to ask him. I nodded toward the realtor, who suddenly became very interested in his shoes. And the facility has been cited 3 times by the state in the past 2 years. Understaffing, medication errors, a resident who left the building unsupervised and was missing for 6 hours. I did not place documents on the table. I did not interrogate anyone. I simply stated the facts. Andrea's face was tight. This is ridiculous. You're making accusations based on partial information. The facility is fully licensed. The price is fair. You don't understand any of this because you haven't been here. You haven't been here for 9 years. I'm not making accusations, I said. I'm giving Mom information she didn't have when she signed the preliminary papers. The admissions coordinator shifted on the sofa. The realtor was very still. Aunt Helen was watching Andrea with an expression I could not read. My mother spoke. Her voice was quiet but clear. Andrea, is that true about the 6 months? You told me everything was paid for. Mom, it's complicated. There are options after the first 6 months, programs, assistance. I was going to explain all of that once things were settled. You told me it was permanent, my mother said. You said I wouldn't have to worry about money. You won't have to worry. I'll handle it. I've been handling everything. That's the point. My mother looked at the admissions coordinator. Is the facility safe? She said there were citations. The coordinator opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She looked at Andrea. Andrea's jaw was working. The citations are public record, I said. Anyone can look them up. My mother turned back to Andrea. You didn't tell me any of this. You told me everything was arranged. Because it is arranged. Claire is trying to scare you. She's trying to make this look worse than it is, so you'll change your mind. She wants the house for herself. She's been trying to take control since the day she arrived. Aunt Helen spoke for the first time. That's not what I've seen. Everyone turned to look at her. Helen was holding her purse in her lap, her hands folded over it. She did not look comfortable, but she did not look away from Andrea. I've been here since Friday, Helen said. Claire asked me to come. She asked me to listen. So I've been listening. She paused. Andrea, you told Ruth that Claire was trying to put her in a state facility, but the facility you chose is the one with the citations. You told Ruth the house price was fair, but the realtor won't even confirm the number in front of everyone. You told Ruth you've been managing everything, but the refrigerator was empty when Claire arrived. Andrea's voice rose. I have been managing everything. I have been here every day for 18 months. You don't get to. I'm not finished, Helen said. Her voice was calm. I didn't say anything 9 years ago. Margaret told me Claire was the one taking care of her. I knew Andrea's story wasn't true. I stayed quiet because I didn't want to cause conflict. I've regretted that for 9 years. I'm not staying quiet today. The room was very still. Robert was staring at his wife. The realtor had stopped pretending to check his phone. The admissions coordinator looked like she wanted to crawl under the sofa. Andrea turned to me. Her voice was low and cold. Are you happy now? You've turned everyone against me. You've humiliated me in my own mother's house. This is what you do. You disappear for 9 years, and then you come back and destroy everything I've built. I haven't destroyed anything, I said. I gave Mom information, that's all. I turned to my mother. She was looking at the floor, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I walked over to her chair and knelt beside it. I did not ask her a series of questions. I did not present her with documents to examine. I said one thing. Mom, I know this is exhausting. I know you want it to be over. But Andrea hid things from you. Things that matter. If you still want to sell the house after you've had time to think about all of this, I'll sign. I won't fight you. But I need you to know what you're agreeing to. Not Andrea's version. The whole picture. She looked at me. Her eyes were tired, but they were clear. I didn't know about the 6 months, she said. I didn't know about the citations. Andrea told me the facility was good. She told me the sale was the only option. There are other options, I said. We can find them, together. But I need you to be the one who decides. Not Andrea, not me. You. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at Andrea. I'm not signing the final papers, my mother said. Not until I understand everything. I want the house taken off the market. I want to see what other care arrangements are possible. And I want Claire involved. Andrea's composure shattered. For a moment, she just stared at our mother. After everything I've done, 18 months of appointments, emergencies, middle-of-the-night phone calls, I gave up weekends, I gave up vacations, I put my own family second for you. And this is what I get? You kept things from me, my mother said. Important things. You didn't give me a choice. I gave you the only choice that made sense. You can't manage this house. You can't manage your medications. You can't manage your finances. If Claire hadn't shown up, everything would have been fine. You would have been safe. The house would have sold. The facility would have worked out. But she had to come back and ruin everything. She always ruins everything. Andrea grabbed her purse. She did not look at me. She did not look at Helen. She walked out of the room, and Robert followed her, and the front door slammed hard enough to rattle the empty picture frames still stacked in the hallway. The meeting dissolved after that. Mark the realtor muttered something about updating the listing status and left quickly. The admissions coordinator followed, her gray suit disappearing through the front door. Aunt Helen stayed. She sat with my mother while I walked Uncle Ray to the door. At the threshold, he turned to me. He was a quiet man. He had been quiet for all the years I had known him. I'm sorry, he said. About before. I didn't know. It was not clear whether he meant he didn't know about Margaret or didn't know about Andrea's scheme. It might have been both. I thanked him and closed the door. That evening, after everyone had gone, my mother asked me to explain everything again. We sat at the kitchen table. I explained the contract terms, the rate increase, the inspection report, the listing price. I wrote it down in bullet points on a piece of notebook paper. My mother read the paper twice. She folded it and put it in the pocket of her cardigan. I didn't know, she said. Andrea told me everything was arranged. She said the facility was nice. She said the house had to sell quickly. I trusted her. She's been here. You weren't. I didn't think I had other options. You have options, I said. We can find them. She nodded. She did not say anything else. But the next morning, she called the attorney and formally revoked her preliminary consent. She called the realtor and told him to take the house off the market. She called the facility and canceled the bed reservation. The for sale sign came down the following week. I hired an independent geriatric care manager to assess my mother's actual needs. The assessment was thorough. The conclusion was clear. My mother did not need a locked memory facility. She needed a home health aide for 4 hours a day, medication management, transportation to appointments, and a durable power of attorney with joint oversight. Neither daughter would have unilateral control over medical decisions or finances. The arrangement would be transparent to both. With the care manager's help, my mother revoked Andrea's sole financial authority and updated the people authorized to receive her medical information. As long as Mom remained able to make her own decisions, those decisions were hers. Both daughters would receive the same information, and neither could make financial or care arrangements on her behalf without her knowledge. Andrea reacted the way I expected. She sent texts, some long, some only a sentence, most of them about betrayal, ingratitude, and everything she believed she had sacrificed. But she could no longer move money, withhold medical information, or change our mother's care arrangements in the dark. The goal was never to punish her. It was to stop her from making decisions our mother did not fully understand. The house may still be sold someday. My mother might eventually choose to move somewhere smaller, closer to services, easier to maintain. But any future sale will be at market price, with full disclosure, with the proceeds placed in a protected trust for her care. Both daughters will have access to information. Neither will have unilateral control. Aunt Helen has called several times. She and my mother have been speaking more often than they had in years. Helen told me she should have spoken up 9 years ago. I did not argue with her. I did not tell her it was okay. But I took her calls. I think that meant something to both of us. I visit my mother on Saturdays. The aide is there during the week, but Saturdays are mine. I bring groceries, real food, vegetables, eggs, bread, the things my mother likes but had stopped asking for. I put them away in the refrigerator that is no longer empty. I make tea. We sit at the kitchen table, and sometimes we talk, and sometimes we just sit. Last Saturday, my mother said something she had been holding for a long time. We were in the kitchen. The tea was cooling. She was looking at her hands. She said, "I knew about your aunt. I knew Andrea was lying. Your father knew. We let it happen because Andrea threatened to keep the children from us. She said we would never see them again. I was afraid. So I let your father send you away." She paused. Her voice did not waver. I have known for 9 years that I chose wrong. I don't have the right to ask you to forget that. I did not tell her it was okay. I did not tell her I forgave her. I said, "I know why you did it. I think I've always known. It doesn't mean it didn't matter. But I'm here now. I'll keep showing up. That's what I can give you. Not the past, just now." She nodded. I nodded. 2 women in a kitchen, neither of us crying, both of us understanding that this was as close to peace as we were ever going to get. I left in the late afternoon. I took the photograph from the envelope, the one my father kept. Me at 23, reading to Aunt Margaret in a hospital room, 3 weeks before she died. I do not know if he kept it because he loved me, or because he felt guilty, or because he could not bring himself to throw away evidence of the truth. I will never know. I put the photograph on the passenger seat and I drove toward the highway. The town scrolled past, the library where I worked summers in high school, the diner where I ate alone after my shifts at the hospital, the road that leads to the cemetery where my father and Aunt Margaret are buried. I did not stop. I did not visit his grave. Maybe someday I will. I am not ready yet. I had walked back into that house after 9 years, and this time, I had not disappeared. I had not signed simply because the family wanted silence. I had not let them replace the truth with the version that was easiest for them. I drove east toward Albany with the photograph on the passenger seat. The road was familiar, but the reason I was traveling it was not. For the first time in 9 years, I was not leaving because someone had told me to go.